Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our board meeting of Monday, November the 15th. We apologize for being a few minutes late because our in-camera session, it was a fairly healthy agenda. It took a little bit longer than anticipated. So we apologize for arriving at this meeting a little bit late. I will call this meeting to order. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and our schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, we learn, and we live. The singing of O Canada.
Épopée
des plus brillantes exploits.
God keep our land.
Glory of saints free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for
Thank you, students. Moving on, you have an agenda in front of you. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to the agenda. And you have that draft agenda in front of you, but there is one item that I would like to add to that draft agenda. And it would be under recommended actions, and it is the delegation to Durham Region Transit regarding student bus passes. And Trustee Thatcher would bring that forward. That would be recommended action D. With that change, are there any objections to the draft agenda? Trustee Lundquist.
I have no objection. Sorry, thank you, Chair. I have no objection. I would just have to declare a conflict in that particular situation because of my employment. So I will recuse myself from that conversation.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. Could I have a motion then to adopt the amended draft agenda? Motion by Trustee Lundquist, seconded by Trustee Templeton. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on, we have two sets of minutes in front of us. I'm looking for one motion. The first to receive the approved minutes of September the 21st, and the second to approve the draft minutes of October the 18th. Could I have one motion, please? Thank you, Trustee Thatcher, seconded by Trustee Templeton. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on. I have a question. Do we have any community presentations this evening?
We do not, Chair Morton.
Thank you, Director Marsh. But I do know that we have ministry memorandums from Director Marsh.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Morton. Happy to update the board on some pertinent ministry memos. The first one is that we received today, and it's related to special education funding and the SIP funding. You may recall last year, the Ministry of Education decided that they wouldn't have us do the individual detailed reports in terms of accessing funding related to student need, but instead they did an average of the previous 3 years and then they increased it by 5%. Today's memo, we haven't analyzed anything yet in terms of what this will mean for Durham, but it looks like they're going to go with the same methodology of the total that we had last year based on that methodology and then increasing it by 5%. We actually had already started to go very thoroughly student by student in terms of the needs that we have within Durham District School Board as part of our commitment to understanding our students and their needs. We were creating those sorts of detailed portfolios for the students. So this announcement today will mean that we'll not be submitting it, but certainly we are still focused on making sure that we're looking for patterns and trends and individualized supports in terms of the work that we do with students. And I'm sure this will be a conversation potentially at the SEAC table as well. I also wanted to say, and this is very positive news, that the Ministry of Education has announced that streaming in grade 9 will end as of this year. So next year, the science curriculum, like the math curriculum this year, will become de-streamed curriculum, and that all applied courses as of next September will be discontinued. What that will mean for the other subject areas that were previously offered as academic and applied is that students will study the academic course, and we will then work to support students being successful. We know that many districts who have piloted the phasing out of applied programming had all students studying at the academic course type. So this has been done before in the province and has been done successfully. And in fact, it was something that Superintendent Nevels was leading discussions with our secondary teams in terms of Durham going ahead and doing this, understanding the significant inequities in the streaming that was occurring in grade 9. So we're very pleased by this decision on the Ministry of Education's part. It supports the direction that Durham wished to take. And we will be providing trustees an update on how the de-streamed math is going. I believe it's on the schedule for late spring to give you some more detailed information with the implementation. And finally, I wanted to let trustees know related to a ministry memo that we had received earlier and a change in regulation that the Ontario College of Teachers is now getting ready to launch the sexual abuse prevention training that all Ontario College of Teachers members will have to take. It will become available in January 2022, and all individuals who are accredited by the Ontario College of Teachers will have to complete the modules by the end of August 2022. And indication of completion of that training will then appear on each individual's public record of achievements. So wanted to follow up with you in terms of that one now being ready to be implemented. That concludes the ministry memos, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. And I see questions. Trustee Forbes, you are first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had a question about the special incidents portion, so the SIP claims. Not everyone who may be watching may not be fully familiar with that. So this would be a process where schools would put an application forth for funding to kind of offset some of the costs, typically EA costs, involved with supporting vulnerable students who have some exceptional needs. And I was just wondering, given the fact that we've had and I wasn't sure, is it just a 5% increase based on last year's, or is it a 3-year average with a 5% increase for this year? I was a little confused by that? And are we concerned, given that the last 2 years we've had limited in-class availability for everyone due to the shutdowns? And I hope that's clear. Sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Thatcher, maybe clearer than my explanation of the funding. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Macaulay, and I'll let her lead the way. She can indicate that funding part again as well, Trustee Forbes, and maybe make it clearer than me.
Good evening, and through you, Chair, if that's all right. So we have engaged in the process. We did a little bit of an analysis this afternoon with Associate Director Wright and myself. It is last year's received funds plus 5%. Because we've had impacts of students in virtual, as well as the opening of additional special education classes to meet the needs of students with life skills programming needs. We do have a shift of EAs from small class actually to regular class, which seems like a bit of a anomaly there, that we've opened additional special education classes, but it's freed up some EA support, because what it's done is put students who have that intensive needs support into a program with specific outcomes, meeting their needs long term. So our initial analysis is this is actually a healthy step forward for the DDSB budget and supports for students based on the announcement this morning.
So
Thank you.
Sorry, just a supplemental quickly. So, and I know this is hot off the press and I wouldn't expect, I guess my concern is that we would be receiving fewer funds. I know it's a 5% increase, but just given the landscape, but it sounds like that may not be the case, but I wouldn't mind maybe hearing more down the road once we get more into it, if that's possible.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. Moving on, we have student trustee Kayla Malcolm with a question. Kayla.
Hi, the de-streaming for all the courses moving forward that you mentioned, is that only for all the grade 9 academic and applied courses, or is that for every grade, including university, mixed, and college stream courses?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair Morton. That is only for grade 9. And the background to that is that Ontario was one of the only jurisdictions in the world that actually started to stream as early as grade 9. And the Ontario research shows very clearly that there was a lot of bias in how that, who was ending up in applied programming. And also, interestingly enough, the provincial research showed very clearly that despite previous gaps in learning, students were much more likely to be successful should they be in the academic course type on their EQAO assessment than they would have been if they had studied at the applied. So there were lots of questions about the effectiveness of applied programming, and that's why this is seen as such a positive step. And it gives students an opportunity to experience their first year of high school without having to make a decision about their pathway, and then making a more informed decision based on having some high school experience in terms of next steps. So we are very positive about this, understanding it's going to require changes in pedagogy, but we think it is the right thing to do for students, and we're very pleased to be supporting it.
Thank you. I have a supplementary question.
Certainly, Kayla.
So I've had, ASAECO was actually speaking about this exact de-streaming situation, and we came to the topic of, because they're not doing this for grade 10s and they're only doing it for grade 9s, when students are then done with grade 9 going into grade 10, will they be told if they don't reach a certain mark, they need to move down to applied courses when they go into grade 10, or will they know themselves whether they should be taking applied or academic?
Right. So interestingly enough, there will be some addendums to the grade 10 curriculum coming forward. I believe there will be addendum to the math curriculum for next year, and then the science to follow it. It is absolutely up to the student and their family to make the decision in terms of which course type they want to study. And very often, and just in small local research, when students are counseled out, so have a desire to be part of an academic program, have a desire to pursue potentially a college or university pathway, when they're counseled out of it and told that they don't belong and that they won't be successful, in fact, their engagement in school, understandably, goes down. Now, historically, I believe educators would make that suggestion and recommendation based on really wanting the student to be successful. And there is this concept that applied programming was much more hands-on. And so it was geared actually for students who felt that they learned more through hands-on learning, and that you could then take transfer courses into academic programming and still have all the pathways open. Many years later, it's very clear that the transfer courses weren't working. It's also very clear that universal design for learning is the right of all students, whether or not they're in an academic or an applied program. And so we need to provide multiple ways for students to learn and demonstrate the learning that they've had, whether they're in academic, university, or college. So the expectations of the curriculum will be met, but it's the opportunity to find multiple entry points into the learning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Thank you, Kayla. Moving on to Trustee Thatcher, you have a question.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Morton. And I'd like to go back to the SIP grants, the SIP, the special education portion. And I just have a question for some clarification around those special classes that qualify for additional educational assistance. And I was just wondering if that would be governed by the submissions for the SIP grant, or would that be under the educational assistant allocation? Is there, how, I wonder if you wouldn't mind just explaining how that is determined.
Thank you, through you, Chair, if that's all right. So the two are linked from a funding perspective, but distinct in terms of the allocation. So the SIP process allows boards to submit for monies already dedicated and approved within the board budget. So we engage in a process of estimation each year, and we staff the system at those levels. And then each fall, as we write the grant claims, it's to reclaim funding, kind of like spending on your line of credit and then getting a credit back and bringing the balance back to zero. So where we allocate staffing is based on student need. So you are correct that many of our small classes, particularly practical learning and developmental, have additional EAs within them to model. So the classes are based on one teacher, 2 EAs, and then we often supplement with additional EAs. Where in those programs or in mainstream, but it just happens to be a bit rarer in mainstream, that a student has 2 or more board support for the majority of the day, we are able to submit a claim, as Director Marsh said, that allows us to access just over $28,000. It's $28,518 this year per claim. Was in the guidance, but it's money's back to support already in place for students. Just around that budget piece on the students that draw that additional support, a portion of the costing of that, but it is the allocation process itself is based on individual student need.
Thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Moving on to Trustee Lundquist, who has a question.
Thank you. I actually don't have a question, but I do have an observation, and I think it's an important one. At least I hope you think it's an important one. So one of the things that has always concerned me is the way we talk about school and the education system. So I'm actually pleased to see the de-streaming of grade 9 more broadly. I think that's important. But it was interesting hearing Kayla, because I've said the same thing. So I'm not trying to single out Kayla or student trustees or anybody else, but I think there's a broader discussion that has to be had at some stage, because the language of, do you go down to applied or up to academic? Because as soon as we talk about it in that way, we're lessening people's experience in some ways, I think. And one of the things that I would like to know is, are we looking at this in terms of student government, or do we have a representation of people in different kinds of programs and that kind of thing? Because I'm not sure that we do. I'm not sure that we don't. But I think that there has to be a broader conversation about the way we talk about education. And it might not be today, but I think we need to have it, because the moment we start talking about going down to a program or something, that it sounds like it's lesser. And there's tremendous value in those programs for lots of kids, and those jobs are equally valuable, and perhaps sometimes more so in the context of the current world in which we live in. And so I really think we need to start addressing the language we use in terms of the programming that we provide, because I think it's actually really important that we create an inclusive educational space where those programs are valued as deeply as ones that are labeled as an academic stream.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist, for sharing those insights and observations. Well done. Would anyone like to respond to that? I think Director Marsh would.
Sorry, I'm having difficulty finding my hand this evening. Thanks for noticing me, Chair Morton. Trustee Lundquist, I couldn't agree more with the comments that you've made. And you'll notice we talk about course types and referenced that, course types is a really neutral way of talking about the different courses that students experience in high school. Very often it's being referred to in other ways that can view some of the pathways more derogatory than others. And then the vision of applied programming truly was that all pathways could potentially, all grade 9 and 10 courses could lead to whichever pathway a student chose, valuing the pathway of work, of college, apprenticeship, or university. And that applied programming was intended to be more hands-on and more practical in terms of the overall expectations, and less time on theory, more time on hands-on application. And unfortunately, that's not how it's played out in the province of Ontario. So the transfer courses haven't been available. And in fact, the research showed very clearly that if you start studying in grade 9 applied mathematics, you're not likely to be able to apply and be successful in a college program in the province of Ontario. And there is something fundamentally wrong with that when it should be leading to college course types at the secondary level. So I think there needs to be, and the trustees have heard this before, but really there needs to be a broad visioning of what Education Ontario is and is not. We're still basing everything on the Royal Commission on Learning, which was from the early 90s in terms of our vision of schooling. And the world has changed so dramatically, and so should our secondary schools, and in particular, the discrete subject areas. It should be more of an interdisciplinary approach with multiple opportunities from hands-on to theoretical, open for all students. So agree with you in terms of our support of it. How we're viewing it is for students to be able to make informed choices based on a grade 9 experience in a secondary school for which pathway they wish to choose in grade 10. But we also want to make sure they understand what it is they're choosing and that we don't mislead them, because if they are studying at the applied course type in grade 10, it may pose challenges in terms of accessing college later on. And we just want to make sure it's not impossible, but it does mean that there needs to be then some different credits taken potentially in summer school to make up in some areas in terms of prerequisites for the college programs. One of the things the colleges do in Ontario is require a mathematics course that is one that, if you haven't done grade 10 academic math, is very difficult to achieve in grade 12. So there are problems with the way the curriculum is working together right now.
Thank you, Director Marsh, for that explanation. Does that response meet your needs, Trustee Lundquist?
I mean, I'm not sure it's my needs, but I do think there's a question. Right, I think that there is a system need to understand the language that we're using, not just the programming, but the language we're using, and the way to ensure that all students are a part of student voice in this broader conversation. So yes, it does address the bigger picture issue But I think that it's beyond just the academic piece. I actually think it's a much bigger conversation that perhaps needs to be had one day.
Chair Morton, I apologize. I'm so with this conversation, I got so on my roll that I forgot to mention we are launching student focus groups this year, and Superintendent Davis is the lead on it. And the goal of the student focus groups is to very intentionally hear from students in all pathways with a variety of different experiences, because we recognize that student government potentially doesn't attract as wide and diverse a student population as we serve. And it's very important that we hear from all students. So we are launching a student voice, a very explicit one, in terms of seeking input from students with a variety of experiences. And I'm sorry, I totally forgot. I had meant to say it and then forgot because I got on the research.
There is no need to apologize, and we certainly appreciate that added message. Moving on to Trustee Barrett.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate, Kayla, you raising the questions as well. And I would agree that the language is very, very important. I also would suggest that we also have not only the student voice, which is a critical component, but we also need parental voice in this too, because often it's parents that help to determine what and determines success and what is not success. So like I recognize the student voice is critical, but I also recognize that sometimes the influence of parents sometimes is in elements as well. And, you know, when we talk about, you know, those jobs are important as well, that too is language that we shouldn't be utilizing because we shouldn't be somehow ranking those jobs as well. So just, but I appreciate you bringing it forward. There's an important elements in this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Student Trustee Malcolm, again. Comment, question?
A question, actually. The DDSB going forward with the de-streaming for all the grade 9 courses, what are we going to do to help the students who most likely would have gone into applied courses because they need that extra understanding or the extra push with that specific course? What are we going to do in the classes to delegate between those who have gone to academic and those who have gone to applied? Because there's a very big difference that I've seen, at least, between the students who have an understanding that go into academic, between the students who have a lesser understanding who go into applied. So the students who might be going into applied but are in the same class might be feeling as if their questions or how their needs don't match up to the same level as those who have gone to applied. And the teacher might be putting more of their time towards those students and not the other students. So is there a plan to how we're going to delegate between the two?
I'm going to go to Trustee. No, I think we'll go to Director Marsh for that.
Thanks, Chair Morton. So we'll, in the spring, bring forward a report in terms of the implementation of the de-streamed math curriculum. And I think Superintendent Nevels at that time will have more detail. But I think the thing that's most important to know is that the research has shown, and it's played out time and time again in the province of Ontario, that it doesn't matter what the student's prior performance was in mathematics as the example. When they went into academic programming, they were much more likely, I think it was 2 times more likely to be successful than had they gone into applied programming. And what that research has demonstrated is that it's not actually about prior knowledge, which, you know, we have always thought in terms of, that's why teachers often encourage students for one pathway or another, was based on that sense of what the student's prior knowledge was. But it does mean that we do look at the way that we teach and that we implement universal design for learning, which provides multiple access points. Having been firsthand in classrooms where all the students were studying academic mathematics and the applied course type was eliminated, it was really invigorating to see those students. You could not tell which students would have been normally in applied or academic. The math talk occurring in that classroom was rich. and the students were confident mathematics learners. So I think there's a lot of positives that will come from this shift, and Superintendent Nevels and team will present more in the spring in terms of the details. But having been in a district where we did this work about 10 years ago, it was really successful in terms of meeting the needs for students. And one of the things I always emphasize to all students is that it's about the math content, but there are also other rich skills we need to be learning across the curriculum areas. And one of those is collaboration, creative thinking, and all of those were really emphasized in these classrooms so that students who were typically high achievers in mathematics, as the example, grew in terms of their capacity to collaborate and in terms of creative thinking, because there were multiple styles of learning occurring within the classroom, and so more flexibility in terms of how to show learning and how to learn. So I think it's a positive for everybody.
Thank you for those excellent questions and excellent responses. Moving on, we have public question period, and it's my understanding that we have 3 individuals who have questions for us tonight. I want to remind those 3 individuals that you have 1 question and 1 supplemental, so a maximum of 2 questions. And our first person is Dylan, and I think Dylan joins us monthly. Dylan, welcome. Your question is. We can't hear you, Dylan.
Hi, everybody. Welcome tonight. This is tonight. I am from the city of Pickering, and I attend currently at Pioneer Secondary School. And tonight's questions are from both November and December. My question tonight is, earlier this year, back on June 21st, 2021, I brought up a period of time when schools were closed during the first wave from March of 2020 to September 2020. But now we want to hear what was COVID-19 management like during the 2020 to 2021 school year, from September 8th of 2020 to December 17th of 2020. So during the second wave, when schools were actually open, and also what were the schedules like at both elementary and secondary schools, and also what were things like during the school closures from December 18th to February 7th, 2021, and what were the schedules like for both elementary, secondary schools and special education classes. That's all my questions I have right now.
Thank you. Director Marsh.
Thanks, Chair Morton. Associate Director Markovsky, feel free to jump in at any point. These are really big questions and require a fair amount of detail. So I think, Dylan, if I'm understanding the question correctly, sort of overall what the pattern and trend was last year, and then how does it compare to how we're doing so far this year? So last year we had much stricter protocols in terms of cohorting. You may recall at secondary, there wasn't the same flexibility in terms of lunch hours where people could mingle. There weren't any extracurricular activities happening. And so very strict protocols, both at elementary and secondary. And despite those protocols being in place and the early dismissal of secondary students and the remote virtual learning every afternoon, we saw an incredible number of cases of COVID in our schools. We did our best to support, but in March, we started to identify to the board that we were very concerned about the number of cases that we were seeing as the Delta variant started to take hold in our region. We were closed then until June. We did have some, but very few cases of COVID in terms of the small class placements where students were attending. The vast majority of students were at home. And it was only for those whose needs couldn't be met in person that we had them at the schools. So as a result of that, cases did go down. This year, we have very protocols in place again. However, we are allowing socialization at lunch at elementary and secondary, so it's not in strict cohorts. There's extracurriculars, and there's a report coming later today in terms of the extracurricular activities that are happening. And the vast majority of the cases that we have seen, and we're not seeing as high of numbers as we would have last spring as an example, but the vast majority of the cases are at the elementary level where there has not yet been a vaccination rolled out. Vaccinations are expected to be available for students aged 5 to 11 starting at the end of November, we hope. And so we anticipate at that time that cases may go down within our elementary schools as well.
Thank you.
All right, and again, I do have a supplemental as well.
Thank you, Dylan. Proceed.
So even I felt like that I know that you were referring to March and April, but despite the protocols that were in place from September to mid-December, there were definitely some notable case escalation. In November and December of 2020, there was an escalation in the number of cases within our schools. So I do recall, because if you people that do recall, I remember I asked this question about this on a year ago. What is there a possibility of an extension of the winter break? That was the reason why, because we had COVID-19 outbreak at Dunbarton High School linked to 12 cases, resulting in 12 cases actually. An outbreak at Pickering High School was resulted in almost 20 cases. So really, even despite the, and also why were special education classes allowed to go back in person in January 2020 while everyone else was learning online?
Thank you, Dylan.
So in January, the extension of the winter break was a short extension, and it was to address, as you said, the numbers were increasing, but they were accelerating because as well of the winter break and this socializing that potentially may have happened during that period. So, and to support students in small class placements, the decision was made to continue with those classes operating. Very often, we want to give parents lots of notice. And while for elementary children, there are challenges as well when parents need to stay home, we also recognize that sometimes in terms of the planning that is required in families, we wanted to create as much stability as possible. Later, we did then identify and work with families in terms of those families where the needs really could not be met remotely, and those are the students that continued to attend school, but it was very few students. And I believe we did do a report on that at the time. I can't remember the percentage of students it was, Dylan, but it was very few, and most were accessing them via remotely alongside other students.
Well, I do want to say before I leave for tonight, I want to, because this is the last public question period of 2021, I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to 2022. And I want to say thank you to Trustee Carolyn Moore for being the board chair for 2021.
Thank you, Dylan, for your very kind words, and we wish you well too. It is so good to see you on a monthly basis.
Yeah, and I also want to say thank you to my teacher, Mr. Rohagan, if he's watching this too.
I'm sure he will appreciate that. Thank you, Dylan. Moving on to the next person who has a question, and that would be Jody Turner. Now, I don't know if Jody is joining us or if somebody has that question. Jody, are you there?
I understood that there was a virtual going to be joining us virtually.
Okay, I will pose the question then. Thank you. And Jody's question is, I was wondering if they are going to change the start time back to when high school started at 8:35 a.m. and finished at 2:40 p.m. This has been 2 years now, starting at 10 a.m., finishing at 4 p.m. This will allow time for students to get to their jobs, sports, and finish assignments, homework. Thank you. Thank you, Jody, and we will go to Director Marsh for a response.
Thank you, Chair Morton. So DSTS, actually they're bringing a report forward later tonight, but they are carrying out a review of bell times for next year. We do not want the 10 to 4 time for next year for secondary schools, but we also recognize that there are limited resources, and that's why they're doing a bell time review for all schools, elementary and secondary, so that we can attempt to get secondary schools starting earlier and therefore ending earlier as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on to the third person with a question, and that is Richard Campbell. And I think that Richard was joining us. Richard, are you there? Richard, have you joined us yet? There is Richard. Welcome, Richard. I understand you have a question
Yes,
and a supplemental.
thanks. Yeah, my question pertains to the advice we received on Friday. I'm a parent of students who attend Julie Payette, and I think I speak for myself and every other parent when I say that we were shocked to hear that the kindergarten program at Julie Payette was canceled. And so I have one question. I mean, it gives rise to many questions, but who made the decision, when, how, and with what input?
Thank you. I'm thinking that Superintendent Margaret Lazarus would be the person to answer. Margaret?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Richard, for that question, and through you, Chair Morton. So just a little bit of the background. The DDSB engaged in an extensive review of the FSL programs. This review began in January of 2020, and when we brought the first report to the Board of Trustees, and so the review began. A year later, that's January 4, 2021, we brought the initial draft report back to the Board of Trustees, at which time they asked us to do further consultation. So the report was extensive. We looked at access to FI, we looked at enrollment in the program, we looked at staffing the program, we looked at the impact of the French immersion on English language programs, and we also looked at physical space in the program. So, and this is what pertains to your question that you're asking tonight. So on January the 4th, when we were asked to do further consultation with the community, we did with the recommendations that we were making to the Board of Trustees. So we consulted again with the community to get their thoughts on what they on their feedback on the recommendations that were made. And so on April the 19th, 2021, that's this year, after further consultations with the community, the Board of Trustees passed the following recommendation to phase out kindergarten in all single track French immersion schools, given the capacity issues of FI schools. And so removing the English kindergarten program was designed to provide more of flexibility within the school to focus on the FI programs. And some of the reasons that went into this decision was finding sufficient and appropriate physical spaces is quite a challenge in a majority of our French immersion schools. And we recognize that given the capacity issues at our FI schools, removing the English kindergarten program would provide more flexibility within the schools to focus on the FI classrooms. Another reason was that as FI begins in grade 1, it does not begin in kindergarten. There's a limited number of kindergarten spots in the FI school. And so there's high demand for those spots. And so registration occurs online, and it was on a first come, first served basis. And there was a concern about the equity of the registration process, which was exacerbated by the fact that some of the potential applicants, some of our parents complained that due to a lack of access to technology for online registration, it made it quite difficult for them to log on and register at that time. And so we also, and one of the reasons that went into the decision, we recognized that the phasing out of kindergarten came with complies with ministry recommendations, ministry regulations, pardon me, which requires all elementary schools hosting a grade 1 class to also host kindergarten classes. But the only exception was our FI single track schools. And so board is not required to operate full day kindergarten in a school if it is an FI single track. So those are some of the decision making that went into passing that recommendation by our Board of Trustees on April the 19th. And you asked, I think your question asked about stakeholder consultation. Throughout the process, when we began in January of 2020, we did extensive consultation. We started with an online survey for our families just to gather information about the review of our programs. And we had over 3,000 parents and family members who participated. And the kindergarten program was raised as well in that communication. And several of our parents, several of the respondents did indicate that they thought it was not a fair process for that registration, for the registration of junior kindergartens in single track French immersion schools. So we had that. Then we had surveys. We surveyed our students, grade 11 students, we surveyed grade 8 students, we surveyed students in the dual track school, we surveyed students in the single track schools. We did an extensive parent survey in the fall of 2020. We had public consultations, virtual due to the pandemic, albeit, but we had public consultation sessions for all of the regions, for Whitby, Oshawa, Ajax, Pickering in the north. And we had, at some points, we had over 1,000 parents registering. Granted, that number did not attend all of those, the registrants did not attend the sessions. However, we did post on the website a video and PowerPoint slides of these public sessions. So we made them available to our parents who were not able to attend those public consultation sessions. We also solicited a voice from the staff, from our administrators, our teachers, and our department heads. So we did quite a fair amount of consultation prior to the decision being made on April the 19th. When the trustees did ask us to go back for further consultation, we brought all the recommendations that we were proposing to the trustees, and we asked our parents to give feedback on those, the recommendations. And one of them was, of course, phasing out kindergarten in our elementary schools and in our single track FI schools, pardon me. And we did receive, as I've said, parents who were in agreement with that because of the unfairness of the process of registration. So that was all the consultation that went into phasing out of the kindergarten program. But the decision was made by our Board of Trustees on April the 19th, 2021. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Superintendent Lazarus. Richard, do you have a supplemental question?
I mean, I think and thank you very much, Madam Superintendent, for the fulsome response. I know I provided the media relations officer the substance of my question today, so thank you for that preparation. How much of the decision was driven by the perceived inequity as opposed to the space component? Because those are obviously two completely distinct things.
So one issue did not outweigh the other. We had to take the report in its fulsome nature. So I wouldn't say that one was more important than the other, but we considered all aspects of this decision before we really made the decision to phase out the kindergarten program. We know that we are giving parents 10 months notice that it's being phased out so that they can make adequate preparation for their child's learning come September 2022. We know that all the children will be redirected back to their English language homeschool and where they will receive a quality education as they would certainly at a single track French immersion school. So I don't think any one decision weighed was considered more important than another. We were just looking at all the issues as a whole to make the decision that we recommend.
Thank you again. Also, thank you to Richard for joining us and posing your 2 questions. Moving on,
Madam Chair,
certainly.
I apologize. I did have my hand up. I don't know if it's disappeared or not.
Oh, no, your hand is up. Yes.
So I'm just speaking to this briefly because I'm wondering if Mr. Campbell has access to those reports, and if he doesn't, if we can provide very specific instructions to him to allow him to access them so he understands fully why the trustees made the decision they did. I think it's important that if he did not see them, that he sees them and has a better understanding of what the trustees were contemplating at the time.
Richard, I think you have been told that this superintendent would engage in further conversation with you if you needed additional information. Is that correct?
Yes, and thank you, Trustee Lundquist. I do not have those reports, but I'll certainly be following up for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, number 10. We have a presentation, a draft operational plan for 21-22, and I asked the senior team to bring forward that presentation.
Thank you. We're really excited to be presenting to you this evening the draft operational plan for 2021-2022. As a team, we're committed to implementing research-based practices to support a system where students and staff thrive. A key underpinning of that work is to ensure that we understand and prioritize the work based on needs assessment of local needs assessment of what our students are showing us and telling us, as well as the families in the communities that we serve, and that we look at the system with the goal of understanding the holistic development of students. And are we going to put the presentation up? That would be great. Thank you so much. This plan, you'll notice, is a little bit different than previous plans because in looking at wanting to implement a holistic development of students, we're looking to work more interdisciplinary across departments and engaging our schools in terms of holistic integrated plans. The idea behind the interdepartmental and interdependence is that we're able to have less initiatives, but go much deeper and richer as far as student learning. We're calling this a draft plan because we have done feedback in terms of seeking feedback on this plan, but we also recognize that in the period of a pandemic, things are not business as usual yet. And so we recognize that we'll need to be nimble in terms of the COVID management planning that is occurring in schools, the labor shortages that we're experiencing. And so we're very sensitive to the many factors that are contributing to the operations of a school. We also wanted to make sure that this plan is, while it's the district operational plan, that there's an opportunity for grassroots innovation that will feed into this plan, and that communication will be two-way as we move forward. And so we're entitled at draft because our intention is for it to be organic, for it to grow and be responsive as needs throughout the system become apparent to us as we work through this year. If we could switch slides, that would be great. So the Durham District School Board strategic plan is one that we remain committed to and has informed the pillars of this plan, has really informed the interdisciplinary approach that we're taking. The pillar of Ignite Learning is something that we take very seriously. And so success, equity, well-being, leadership, engagement, and innovation are seen throughout the operational plan for this year. Our goal is that every child experiences a sense of belonging within the Durham District School Board, and that they recognize our community as one that is committed to being a learning committee grounded in equitable practices where all identities are welcomed and reflected and feel a sense of being celebrated. There's a strong also importance and emphasis this year on developing relationships, as there was last year, a relational connection for staff and amongst staff, as well as a strong connection for staff with students, with the curriculum being the vehicle of how we engage students in that positive relationship. It is time to celebrate after all of the challenges that we've been through, to celebrate the joy of learning. And so this plan tries to pivot and focus on remembering how exciting learning can be when learning is done in an engaging manner, where we're focused on the many disciplines within a school, from the arts, technology, science, mathematics, and humanities. Students, though, to be learners and to be active learners, need to feel safe, because learning can be a vulnerable prospect for many. And so through our emphasis on universal design for learning, our intention is for students to have multiple entry points so that they can feel safe and active learners. We know that students have been challenged during the pandemic, and there have been many different experiences, and the return to school has not been smooth for all. We remain committed to understanding the varied experiences of both staff and students during the pandemic, and that the approach of focusing on the holistic development of students is the approach that research has shown very clearly that learning organizations that focus on holistic development of students and well-being and mental health are the learning organizations that will move forward successfully, having served students during this very challenging period. And so I'll now turn it over to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Director Marsh. As you'll see in the visual, that provides you a bit of a, I guess you could say, overview in terms of how the integrated thinking moves our strategic priorities into the two key outcome areas. I'm going to actually take a moment to speak to the first outcome there on student learning and well-being, and then I will turn it over to Associate Director Wright, who will speak in relation to people and culture. And you'll notice that our work is centered on a shared commitment to Indigenous rights, human rights, and equity. And within our operational plan, those two key outcomes really are intended to build coherence, where staff understand the relationship between our strategic pillars and see evidence of that relationship in our key strategies. That natural integration of our work helps to hold one another accountable. So the student learning and well-being outcome descriptor ensures that student voices and identities are honored in innovative environments that are focused on inquiry, well-being, and global citizenship. School cultures engage students to thrive academically, socially, physically, and emotionally. And when we look at student achievement, we know that it directly connects with student identity, which also speaks to our work in equity and further links to well-being and engagement. And we believe that every child needs to feel a sense of belonging, where their voice is valued, so that we're truly reflective of how we engage students in all aspects of learning.
The people and culture outcome descriptor empowers staff to contribute to an organizational culture through respectful relationships and processes that are inclusive, responsive, fair, and equitable. When we consider the people and culture priority, it directly speaks to our partnership with Audit and our commitment to providing safe and respectful working environments. It also supports our effort to identify, prevent, and address discriminatory barriers and experiences for employees. It allows for a more collective approach to how the work of each department supports an organizational culture where all staff feel a sense of belonging and are empowered to contribute to the overall success of the system.
Next slide, please. The analysis of student achievement and well-being indicators, student census, workforce census findings, both internal to the Durham District School Board and provincially, tell us that discriminatory barriers exist within learning and working environments. Professional discourse has moved staff planning and actions beyond the debate as to whether barriers exist or not, towards a structural evolution and finding sustainable actions rooted in anti-oppressive and anti-racist practices that understand the importance of intersectionality of identities. We are growing in our understanding of what it means to uphold Indigenous rights, for example, with concrete actions to reconciliation and what our individual responsibilities as duty bearers of human rights code are in the design of learning and working environments free from discrimination and discriminatory barriers. Each day we see responsive and relevant innovation by DDSB educators, amplifying student and family voice, and this plan accelerates that vision. We must all act to prevent disproportionate outcomes for all students, families, and employees.
To support our shared commitments and responsibilities, here are key principles that will guide our approaches to implementing the initiatives in the plan. So first, we will integrate and embed Indigenous rights, human rights, and equity into all of our work. And this includes examining and addressing all forms of discriminatory and racist barriers. And to do this, we will engage with DDSB communities, so students, families, employees, and community partners. Their unique experiences and perspectives will help shape what we do and how we do it, and will make the concept of nothing about us without us come to life in our planning and in our decisions. And we'll also be open and transparent about what we're doing, and we'll report on our progress and share the results.
Central to our model is the importance of the inquiry cycle. Learn, plan, act, observe, assess, and reflect. This cycle will allow us to understand that changes in behavior are an indicator of authentic learning. When working with staff in particular, we want them to have a deep understanding of the sorts of concepts of coherence. Our work as we go forward will stress integration, collaboration, coherence, and accountability, but also impact. We believe that an increased emphasis on our responsibilities and accountability means that we will also be able to focus on and celebrate impact. We are really excited as a team about the opportunity to engage in our work in this integrated, interdepartmental manner, because we think it will reinforce the notion of embracing students holistically and creating a responsive and compassionate system.
We are committed to providing services, workplaces, and learning environments that center Indigenous rights and are welcoming, respectful, and free from discrimination and anti-Indigenous racism. Implementation of the Indigenous education policy and procedure will include ongoing opportunities for all employees to engage in learning about Indigenous rights and the ongoing impacts of colonization. This learning will guide the identification and removal of systematic barriers in day-to-day practices, policies, and procedures. School learning plans and department plans will reflect the DDSB core priority of upholding Indigenous rights. We will continue to support ongoing learning for all employees to better understand our collective roles and responsibilities around human rights, anti-discrimination, and anti-racism in our learning and working environments. To support individual and shared organizational responsibilities, we will implement human rights action plans in all system departments. This will help us apply human rights principles to our everyday work in practical and concrete ways. We will focus on identifying, preventing, and addressing racism, ableism, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, faithism, classism, and all other forms of discrimination in our schools and workplaces. We will continue to update policies and principles to better align with the human rights principles. We will be establishing a new human rights investigator role to address human rights complaints. All employees have a right to a safe and respectful work and learning environment. We continue to build trust through open, two-way communication and transparent processes. The revised workplace harassment, workplace sexual harassment, and safe and respectful workplace policy will be implemented following consultation and board approval. The We Are DDSB workforce census will be completed early in 2022 and will provide data on the impact of our equitable recruitment practices in diversifying our workforce.
The DDSB supports formal and informal leaders through professional learning, which builds individual and collective skills. We have a dual track approach to our adult model of professional learning, academic, and corporate, because we recognize that leadership comes in many forms in the organization. This learning supports everyone, the people who work in schools and the people who work in the board office to support schools. We all work to support our students, our staff, families, and communities. We have programs for aspiring leaders, aspiring superintendents, leadership network opportunities, and mentoring. We offer leading and learning opportunities for not only classroom teachers, but for all leaders, such as members of our corporate department, clerical, educational assistants, custodians, early childhood educators. Opportunities for informal and formal leadership learning is essential because we all play a role in supporting student achievement and belonging in the organization. The upcoming release of the reimagined and redesigned school learning plan focus on school teams articulating grassroots level needs. In turn, these local learning needs will feed into a board level learning plan, which will support the stated needs of the school in the system. Essentially, we are completely revamping the process in which we engage in innovative ways to address local issues closer to their source in a more customized fashion. The DDSB values the voices of our employees. The employee experience checkpoint indicated that we need to continue to focus on effective communication and build opportunities for consultation and feedback as we develop, plan, and implement new initiatives. We learn and improve through collaboration between departments and stakeholders.
The DDSB is committed to fostering the foundational conditions throughout our board that support positive well-being and mental health for both students and staff. Inclusive student services teams are part of every school community, both in person and DDSB at home. As learning and life experiences for individual students continue to shift, inclusive student services teams are committed to examining and changing practices to promote access and remove barriers within all layers of our service model of Tier 1 supports for all, such as the commitments to deepening universal design and addressing ableism, through to Tier 3 intensive supports for students and evolving practices. Use of verbal consents, increased allocation for priority secondary schools, and our current pilot of group service offerings to build peer communities are engaged this year to broaden service reach and to help ensure timely and equitable access to our supports. Each day, we have students who arrive to school having lived through adverse experiences which affect their life views and their readiness for learning. Good trauma-informed practice is contingent on evidence-based content, but also is acutely aware of the process of implementation, as both educators and students will have their own level of trauma exposure, both personal and secondary trauma. It is important for school leaders and all educators to be aware of such and have their practices informed in ways that make school a protective factor and mitigate the risks of re-traumatization. Our commitment within the operational plan is to continue system learning, moving us from trauma aware to trauma sensitive on our way to being a trauma informed system.
Learning about Indigenous knowledge systems, truths, histories, and contributions benefits all students and must be present in all curriculum areas as we continue to actively engage in reconciliation and eliminate anti-Indigenous racism and discriminatory barriers in schools. Through ongoing learning opportunities and coaching and mentoring alongside knowledge keepers, Indigenous community members, and the Indigenous education team, we will design and deliver engaging learning opportunities that uphold Indigenous rights and anti-colonial pedagogical practices. A resource bank, including vetted resources, will be created to support educators in school learning and school leaders with ongoing curriculum design and delivery.
Our work at DDSB is centered on a shared commitment to upholding the human rights of staff and students by identifying, preventing, and intentionally addressing all forms of discrimination and racism in the learning and working environment. Integral to upholding human rights is the importance of staff's understanding of their duties and responsibilities in promoting and protecting human rights in their work. DDSB staff will continue to implement the actions outlined in the updated Compendium of Action for Black Student Success to ensure that Black students are learning in environments that affirm their identities, build on their strengths, and contribute to their well-being, but most importantly, protect them from anti-Black racism. We will continue to build organizational capacity in addressing and dismantling anti-Black racism at DDSB. A new partnership with Ontario Tech University gives a cohort of teacher candidates an opportunity to learn about anti-oppressive teacher practices in selected priority schools across DDSB. This cohort meets at Village Union Public School for a portion of their B.Ed program, Bachelor of Education program, and they engage in their practicum in other DDSB priority schools. We continue to envision ways of serving our priority schools to meet their unique needs. In an effort to align and allocate resources with an equity lens, conversations and planning have begun at the senior level. The intention is to create interdepartmental working groups in order to inform a transparent process for determining what data will be used to drive certain staff and financial allocations. It is hoped that the outcome will provide equity of access to outcomes for all students.
As we look forward to strengthening school cultures, we feel that the voices of our students, our caregivers, and our educators must be heard for all to feel valued. Our recently updated climate survey gives us some insight into what we must do better. We continue to focus on meaningful relationships, positive spaces, and work climate so that everyone feels safe. The Positive School Climate Department continues to interact with other departments within the board to strengthen the interactions between people in the organization. This means consultation with the Equity Department, the Special Education Department, the Human Rights Department, and more. A culture is about people, and we know that means that we must continue to focus on cohesive interactions so that all will thrive. We have planned opportunities to hear all voices and measure impact. We will be working with our Accountability and Assessment Department to send out surveys after each professional development session, after we meet with leadership teams to learn. We will also follow up after a few weeks to see how the learning has changed practice and how we can continually support with resources, human and other. We will also be soliciting student voice through surveys and focus groups. We want to know what happens after learning, what the impact is for students because they are the center of the work. Proactive Sorry, I just kind of lost my page for a second. Sorry. Proactive anti-bullying practices help to create that positive school climate that allows students to feel safe. When students and staff develop meaningful relationships, students not only feel valued, but they also feel safe and they thrive. As a district, we encourage students to talk to any staff at their schools that they feel comfortable with to report bullying that is happening to them or someone else. Students, parents, and community members can also report incidents of bullying through the online tool Report Bullying Now. From November 22nd to the 26th, we recognize Bullying Awareness and Prevention Week in the DDSB and remember the impact that bullying can have on school community. Research, parent engagement. Research studies have shown that student learning and achievement improve when parents play an active role in their children's education, and that good schools become even better when parents are involved. This year, working with the Parent Involvement Committee, we will continue to support, encourage, and enhance meaningful parent engagement at the school level and at the board level by undertaking a variety of parent engagement opportunities to improve student outcomes and build public confidence. Global competencies. The development of global competencies supports all students to reach high levels of achievement and to acquire the knowledge, skills, and values they need to become personally successful and actively engaged citizens. We will engage educators in consolidating K-12 global competencies framework from focused on critical thinking, inquiry, student voice, creative thinking, and civic responsibility.
This year, the grade 11 First Nations Métis and Inuit Voices course was introduced into 9 secondary schools as part of the phase 1 rollout of the curriculum. The course focuses on building relationships with an emphasis on student choice and student voice and text selection, and multiple ways for students to demonstrate their learning. Teachers new to this course have received professional development and support, as well as part of the implementation in-school supports from NBE coaches. The 2021-2020 school year saw the introduction of the new grade 9 de-streamed mathematics course. And as we de-stream other courses, we will continue to prepare resources and supports for all teachers across the system. Although we are just finishing up with the first quadmester today, initial data from midterm shows that this course has been effective in terms of student achievement and providing all students, regardless of their potential pathways, with the opportunity to learn together and succeed in the grade 9 year. This year, we introduced 3 new SHSM specialist high skills major programs, including a transportation and non-for-profit SHSM at Dumbarton High School, as well as a new information communication technologies SHSM at Pickering High School. These 3 programs are part of the 68 total SHSM programs at our board. Starting this year, we will also expand our promotion of our SHSM programs to our grades 7 and 8 students to increase their knowledge of programs and to support their pathway plans as they begin to transition to high school. We have approached this school year in relation to our science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM offerings with a focus on encouraging participation in STEM activities and courses to increase representation in STEM-related careers and pathways for previously underrepresented groups. In partnership with Indigenous Knowledge Keepers, DDSB treaty partners, and the Indigenous Education Department, the Indigenous Outdoor Education Coach and Outdoor Education Team have revamped all outdoor education programs and resources to ensure they are inclusive of Indigenous knowledge systems with a focus on learning on and from the land. As we continue to move and center identity in our kindergarten classrooms, we are encouraging in ongoing knowledge construction around how to ensure successful starts in the Durham District School Board for all students. This year, we are deploying early year support teachers to come alongside kindergarten to grade 3 educator teams to identify where students in their learning environments allow students to thrive and where structures may present barriers, with teams working together to dismantle those barriers and reconstruct environments where students can reach their full potential. Next slide.
Monitoring progress and reflecting on the impact of our work is a large but critical task that will require a wide variety of information from classrooms, schools, and workplaces. The feedback that provides the greatest insight will differ across the strategies and may involve reflecting on narratives and experiences from interviews, focus groups, thought exchanges, and other feedback processes. We'll be considering participation practices and achievement from surveys, assessments, attendance, and community or provincial data. Some strategies may be paused to reflect the needs of pandemic management during this unprecedented time. However, as we listen to the experiences of our students, staff, and families, we'll be considering key reflections of representation, alignment, impact, timelines, and decision-making, as you can see on the slide.
Next slide, please. Durham District School Board is comprised of talented, dedicated, and creative staff in all roles. We're very much looking forward to working collaboratively with that staff this year. We understand that the work of collaboration is slower work, but it is also richer work, and that we're all equally dedicated to seeing the success and well-being of our students. Really pleased to present this plan with you, with the senior team tonight to you, our Board of Trustees, and very happy to take any questions that you may have. We're also looking forward, of course, to our mid-year update, where we'll provide status information in terms of the interdisciplinary work we're taking on this year. Thank you.
Thank you to the senior team. That was a very impressive presentation, and obviously, a lot of cooperation, a lot of collaboration went into that presentation. So thank you to the senior team. The first question will be Trustee Forbes.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the presentation, and I like the how human rights and Indigenous rights are really woven through a lot of this plan. It's so essential. I just had a question about the not-for-profit high skills major. I was really intrigued by that, and I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit more about that.
Director Marsh.
Sorry, I think I'll let Superintendent Nevels to take the lead. Chair Morton, thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that question, Trustee Forbes. Yeah, great new SHSM that we're offering this year. As you know, all of our SHSMs prepare students for a sector that they may be interested in pursuing a pathway in. So this is for students that are thinking about a career potentially with a not-for-profit. So it allows them to develop those skills that would be required for them to go off into that pathway. So it's definitely a really exciting for those students that are interested in those careers with a not-for-profit.
Thank you. Moving on to Trustee Barnes.
Thank you. A very impressive presentation. I really love the amount of detail that have come forward through that. I especially love the piece around the group that will support early education. I think that is one of the biggest piece of our system that needs to be engaged. As we know, some of the outcomes that we come from our young people as they move up through the system. So that is fantastic. I like the accountability and transparency that's built in and woven through everywhere, because I think I believe that measured and looked at gets done. So I'm appreciative of that piece as well. The part about global competency is really changing our education looks. And I think our young people will benefit and be way readier to venture off from under our wings as they go forward to learn. And so I just want to thank you in regards to that. The piece as well as proven practices. So we're not doing this just based on things that we're guessing at, but we're going with proven practices that are out there, and we're taking the best of that and incorporating it. So I look forward to seeing this operationalized. I'm always impressed with the things that come forward on paper, but it will be interesting to see what it looks like throughout our system. And also the proactive bullying piece, because that is something that we know our parents and our students and our teachers can get very passionate about. So thank you so much for this. And as we go forward, I know we are working very hard to make it an integrated system. And so I hope as we form our different work teams and move forward the work, that we don't lose that integrated approach where everybody is looking at the system together and not just in silos, because we need to get past the pockets of excellence so we just have an excellent system. So thank you very much for all the work that has gone into this.
Thank you, Patrice. Moving to Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you, Chair Morton. I really appreciated this presentation because I feel I'm gonna be cautious in how I say this, because sometimes I say things that don't come out sounding quite how I intend them to. I'm strongly supportive of embedding human rights and Indigenous rights into not just curriculum, but in systems, and re-examining the challenges that have arisen as a result of colonialist practices and whatnot. But one of the things I don't think we talk about a lot is student like actual learning and achievement. Sometimes I feel like we haven't been doing a lot of that recently, and I don't know if that's just my perception again, but this is helpful for me because I do think that that we need to spend some time talking about that. And it is certainly an observation that I have had from other parents of children in system. But I want to actually revisit the point that Trustee Forbes raised about the not-for-profit element. Not because I don't support it, because I do, and I think that presenting people with alternative career paths is really, really important. I think my own career path would have been very different had I been presented with different options. But one of the things that I worry about is we create programs and we don't actually have the infrastructure necessary to support those programs. And I'm worried about this one because I actually had a call from a staff member some time ago now when I was running what was essentially a not-for-profit in Whitby. And I don't know how that's working, how well that's working in the context of a pandemic when people couldn't do in-person placements and that sort of thing. And so I'm wondering if that has put a kind of a monkey wrench into those plans because things are different and it's hard to actually physically place students in particular programs, not just the not-for-profit one, but that was the one that was raised with me. So I know that that was an issue, and I don't know if it continues to be an issue or not. And I would just like somebody to maybe comment on that, because I'm fully supportive of creating different paths and avenues of learning. But I need to be clear that if we're doing that, that we have the infrastructure to support them appropriately, because if students are scrambling to find placements, for example, and can't, that's a problem.
And to answer her question, we would turn to Director Marsh.
Sorry, Superintendent Nevels will take.
Thank you. Superintendent Nevels, you're on.
Through you, Chair Morton. Anytime a school board puts forward an application for a new SHSM programming, there's a pretty intense application that actually requires that they look at local community in terms of those placements. So as you know, each SHSM requires a co-op component. So the school that put forward that application, as part of their research, looked out throughout the Durham region in terms of opportunities that would be available for students in terms of co-op placements. As you mentioned, Trustee Lundquist, COVID has put a bit of a monkey wrench in things for us in terms of co-op placements. We have tried to offer as many virtual opportunities as we could throughout the pandemic. And actually, we were able to get some new opportunities for students that we didn't have before the pandemic through a virtual offering. So it's kind of the silver lining sometimes that we have with COVID, because we may be able to keep some of these virtual co-ops going even post-pandemic. But it definitely, our co-op placements have kind of been reduced, but we're excited that they've increased a little bit this year to last year, and we look forward to them continuing to grow.
Thank you, Superintendent Nevels. Moving on. Oh, is supplemental?
I might add, and Superintendent Nevels, you may have more information on this one, but the other thing to think about for not-for-profit, of course, is that education is a not-for-profit organization, and we do know we have lots of access to, there is a sense sometimes because people have been in a K-12 school that they understand a K-12 school, but it's very different having been a student and actually doing a co-op placement where you're responsible for different outcomes and supporting the work within a classroom. So that's one that we're really looking forward to supporting and growing future educators in our district as well. And I did want to add that because I think in light of the extreme shortages we're seeing in teaching across the province, the more we can encourage and show people that this is a valuable pursuit in terms of a career, I think the better served our society will be, as well as other not-for-profit agencies.
Good point. Trustee Lundquist, supplemental?
No, it's funny that it didn't occur to me that education was a not-for-profit that would provide tremendous opportunity and we would have access to that rather easily. So shame on me for not actually thinking outside of that very narrow box. And that makes me less concerned because I was worried about the idea of we were creating programs and not being able to provide the opportunities that are necessary to complete them. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Trustee Edwards, you have a question or a comment?
Thank you for that clarification, Director Marsh, because I was going to say, is education included in that in your category of not-for-profit? Because I could see a huge potential, so I'm glad it is as far as that's concerned. But I echo some of the comments around, Trustee Bard's made and around. We talk a lot about collaboration and the interdisciplinary collaboration and the different divisions and not having pillars. And especially one of the guiding principles, of course, and everyone talked about the data collection and being upholding the responsibility to carry through ongoing data collection, feedback, and reporting. I'm just wondering, is that because, and it sounds like we're going to be doing a lot of additional data collection, is that reporting going to be shared with the board? And I'm not only talking from a board level, but I'm just thinking from for each of the municipalities, to the trustees in their areas, to that extent, so that we can ensure that we're holding our responsibilities around accountability, ensuring our policies are effective, and as well as one of our major things is around student achievement, ensuring that student achievement is being advancing for all students. So I'm just wondering about the additional reporting and more detailed reporting, particularly for the areas of trustees.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Morton, I think that the important thing to remember is that the responsibility of the board in the Education Act actually isn't back to your direct constituents, but it's the board as a whole. So when we report out on board level data, that is fulfilling the responsibility of trustees in terms of looking after student achievement and ensuring that we are supporting student achievement of the students across the district. Everything that we're doing is in service of student achievement, but we do understand, for example, when we focus on well-being, there is a direct connection between students who are well and students who are learning. We are attempting to diversify the data we're collecting, because traditionally there were some very limited sources of data that were really mostly about points in time around achievement. We will continue to have access to those when they're available to us, like report card data, like EQAO data, but we are looking to diversify it and have some more qualitative data available in terms of those experiences. And I think they would be more district level, not committing to disaggregating them by region because of the complexity of that. But certainly when we're doing, for example, student focus groups, the intention of what we're learning from students, we would then feed that back to schools, as well as encouraging to have more student focus groups at the school level. So everything we're doing, we're hoping to have multi-prongs of it. So we'll have some system ones that help us as a system, but we'll also encourage school level practice. That data may not feed up to us. We would rely more on the centralized data that we do through the student focus groups. And that's just one example, Trustee Edwards. In terms of the teacher surveys around professional learning, again, those are things we'll collect centrally and be able to report back, both to the participants as well as part of our end of year monitoring. Much of this will be available end of year. Mid-year, what we hope to update you on are the activities. Are they happening? How many are happening? What's the engagement like? End of year, the data will look differently because we'll have had time to collect more, analyze it, and present it back to you.
Thank you. Do you have a supplemental, Donna?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Thank you. Moving to Trustee Thatcher.
Well, thank you, and through you, Chair Morton. And not to be repetitive in any way, but I certainly agree with many of the comments made tonight about the operational plan, presenting many initiatives which are diverse and inclusive. I've heard the words pilot program a few times tonight, which certainly I think demonstrates innovation and forward thinking. I wanted to highlight the teacher candidates who were in the priority schools, because I was just so impressed with that. I really appreciate it, because I know as an educator myself in some of our priority schools, I have very fond memories of the students and the families that I met through that time. So just to mention that particular program. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I very much appreciate the effort that has gone into this report. I look forward to see the plan and how it's operationalized Two things specifically that I'm going to be looking for: the grade 11 Indigenous English course. I want to learn more about that. And I'm also really impressed that we are bringing the specialist high skill majors to grades 7 and 8, because that transition from elementary to secondary to me is key. So thank you all for the work that you have done to bring this forward to us. Thank you. Moving on in our agenda, number 11, I'm going to go to Trustee Thatcher and ask for the report from the in-camera.
Thank you, Chair Morton. The board approved the actions of the Committee of the Whole in camera and adopted the motions made at the Committee of the Whole in camera meeting as follows: the disclosure of intimate personal or financial information in respect of a member of the board or committee, an employee or prospective employee of the board, or a pupil or his or her parent or guardian. Decisions in respect of negotiations with employees of the board, administrative transfers and placement, personnel issues, and property matters. Chair Morton, this is my report.
Thank you for that report. Moving on, good news from the system. We've had a lot of good news tonight, but we're looking forward to even more. Director Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Morton. I'm going to happily turn it over to the video with students narrating much of the positive things that happened this last month.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of DDSB students and staff, we are happy to bring you good news from across the system.
Congratulations to Dr. Robert Thornton's education assistant, Ernestine Fraser, on being recognized by the Toronto Raptors for going above and beyond in performing acts of kindness during the pandemic. She has made a positive impact helping seniors, students in her school, and community.
DDSB students have been engaging their school communities to show they care with school-based food drives across the region, including at Pickering High School and Meadowcrest Public School. Pickering students set up a drive-through food drop-off, while Meadowcrest students collected food items for Feed the Need Durham to help nourish our communities.
Students at Waverly Public School were overjoyed to participate in Bring Back Play Day to celebrate being one step closer to building the school's first ever playground. At the event, Oshawa Parkway Rotary Club presented a check for $27,500, putting the school even closer to their fundraising goal. As of November 9th, the school had raised $59,000, leaving them just shy of their goal of $60,000.
On November 8th, we honored Indigenous Veterans Day by lowering school flags across the district to half-mast, and resources were shared with educators to support learning about the contribution of Indigenous veterans in classrooms. As part of Remembrance Week, DDSB schools created beautiful art and hosted impactful events to honor all who served and continue to serve our country during times of war, conflict, and peace. 2 armored vehicles from the Ontario Regiment Museum were on display outside of Sinclair Secondary School. The students learned about the vehicles from museum volunteers.
We would like to congratulate grade 12 student Olivia Taylor from Dumbarton High School for being selected to the National Rugby Development Academy. Rugby is a passion in Olivia's family, as her brother Justin Taylor, a Dumbarton graduate, has also been selected to Canada's U19 national rugby team.
IT Services hosted a social media campaign for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, sharing tips and resources each week in October. The campaign was designed to help students, parents, and staff stay cyber safe, whether working or learning from home, at school, or in the office. The topics included phishing email threats, social engineering threats, our role in cybersecurity, and staying safe in the cloud.
The first week of November has been designated Treaties Recognition Week in Ontario. During this week, students across the district engaged in learning about treaties and treaty relationships. The Indigenous Education Department supported educators and students in improving their knowledge and building understanding of treaties through online resources and Indigenous scholar guest speakers.
Students from Meadowcrest, C.E. Broughton, and Ganditsediagon public schools laced up their shoes and got active for Walk and Roll to School Week. This initiative from the region of Durham encourages students to walk or roll to school with the goal of increasing physical activity levels, reducing car emissions, and alleviating vehicle congestion in school zones. Some students walked, while others rolled by bike, wheelchair, or scooter. Participation was tracked daily on a large chart, and students who participated were entered into a draw to win prizes provided by the Region of Durham.
Schools across the region recognized Early Childhood Educators Appreciation Day on October 21st. Students and staff recognized the valuable contributions of our child care workers and early childhood educators, and the impact they have on children, families, and communities in making a difference in the DDSB each day.
Melanie Korak, a teacher at Coronation Public School, was recognized in a CBC feature article about inspirational teachers after being nominated by parents, students, and peers. Melanie is in her 24th year of teaching at DDSB and has a great passion for children's mental health and well-being. In her grade 1 and 2 split class, she teaches daily mental health messages and positive affirmations to help students to develop a growth mindset and feel good about themselves. Melanie's classroom mantra is, "I see you, I hear you." Congratulations, Melanie.
Congratulations to our many volunteers of distinction across the DDSB for their help in supporting our students and staff. They have had a major impact on our school communities, and we are so grateful for their continued support.
As you can see, the dates of significance take us to the end of November.
Thank you to Liam and Alania from Anderson CVI for reading this month's good news.
And Chair Morton, that does conclude the good news from the system for this month. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we certainly appreciate our 2 Anderson students participating in the good news of the system. Thank you. Well done. Moving on to recommended actions, and we do have 4. The first one, Trustee Thatcher, your standing committee meeting from November the 1st.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Chair Morton, the report can be found on pages 35 to 41. The following motion was carried and the resolutions were adopted at the standing committee meeting on November 1st, 2021. And it was moved by Trustee Michael Barrett that the Durham District School Board move to a hybrid model if in-person and virtual meetings for in-person or virtual and/or for board meetings only commencing January 2022 and recognizing and adhering to all health recommendations by the province and the local health unit. I move, Chair Morton, I move that the board now receive the minutes and approve the actions of the November 1st, 2021 Standing Committee and adopt the resolutions that were passed.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. You have put forward a motion. I am asking somebody to second that motion. Trustee Barnes, comments or questions?
Just a point of clarification, if I could, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
Are we dealing with the motion separately, or are we dealing with, I think I asked this the last time we did this, or are we dealing this under the umbrella of accepting the minutes and therefore adopting the motion? Because I believe in the past, what we have done is brought forward the motion, passed the motion, and then accepted the report from the committee chair. Just seeking clarification on process.
And I like what we've done in the past. I would ask Trustee Thatcher to bring forth the motion that you had brought forth. Trustee Barrett, we will vote on that, and then we will go to the general motion. Would you be happy with that, Trustee Barrett?
Yes, and I would be pleased to be able to bring forward the motion again from the standing committee to bring it forward to the board for consideration.
Would you like to reiterate that motion for us, Trustee Barrett?
Well, Christine Thatcher had just read it out, but I can read it again. But that the Durham District School Board moved to a hybrid model of in-person virtual meetings for board meetings only commencing January 2022, recognizing and adhering to all health recommendations by the province and the local health unit. I'd like to put that motion on the table.
Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Seconded by Trustee Barnes. Comments or questions regarding that motion? Trustee Lundquist.
I don't have an issue with the motion, although I think that it might need a minor amendment because it's not just the province and the local public health, it's the province or provincial public health or local public health. And provincial public health is not the same as the province, and they can still enact orders and directives. So I wonder if that could be a friendly amendment to it.
Your thoughts on that, Trustee Barrett?
I don't believe it changes the substance of the motion whatsoever. In fact, strengthens it. So I'm quite comfortable with that.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a seconded motion. We will be voting on that. All of those in favor, I ask that you go to your reactions. The green check mark would indicate that you support that motion.
Kind of
as amended.
As amended, correct.
I'm sorry, Chair Morton. I was just going to ask, are we moving the vote to the stadium seating for ease of tallying the vote and for everyone online to view the vote?
Yes, we can see your votes. Yes.
It may take them a moment for it to move to auditorium. I do believe that is the plan. And so it's green check mark and red X's.
If you are not in favor of that motion, you could use the red X. Thank you. I see 8 individuals who are supporting that motion. I see 2 individuals who are not supporting that motion. That motion has passed. Thank you. Trustee Crawford, did you have a question?
No, Madam Chair, it was just on procedure. There are no friendly amendments. The amendment should have been voted on, but I would suggest it would have been passed anyway. So it was just a procedural question.
Thank you.
I would agree. I mean, I think it can still be a friendly amendment, but I think it probably should have been voted on as well.
Just a minor change.
Thank you. Going back to Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, Chair Morton. I would now like to say that the report is found on pages 35 to 41. I move that the board now receive the minutes and approve the actions of the November 1st, 2021 Standing Committee and adopt the resolutions that were passed.
Thank you. We've got the stadium seating. We will remain with that. If you are, so I don't have a seconder yet, do I? Seconded by Darlene Forbes. Thank you, Darlene. Green check mark indicates that you support this motion. A red X would mean that you are not supportive. Please indicate. This motion has passed. Thank you. Moving on to B, financial process and the 2021 financial report. We will go to Associate Director Wright.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Through you, Madam Chair, it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce this evening Senior Finance Manager Melissa Durward, who is going to present the report to us this evening.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Tonight's report can be found beginning on page 42 of the package. The first part of the report walks through the financial process that takes place during a fiscal year at the board, also including some of the roles of some of the committees, the trustees, as well as staff and external parties. And attached as Appendix A to the report tonight is the report that was presented to the Audit Committee on November the 8th, which includes the financial statements as audited by KPMG for the year ended August 31st, 2021. The statements are presented tonight for your approval. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Melissa. Melissa, I'm looking at your recommendation on page 45. The motion is, it is recommended that the 2021 financial report of the Durham District School Board, including transfers to and from internally restricted funds, be approved as presented. Could I have somebody put forward that motion? Thank you, Michael Barrett. Seconded by? Trustee Barnes. Any questions? Any comments? We'll go to Trustee Edwards first.
Thank you, and I appreciate that the chart on page 47 does say the trustees' governance, but one of the things that when it comes to going through the budget process and so forth is still public consultation. And I just, and I know we did it, I just feel that it kind of was a miss in the report that, you know, when we went through the budget process and then eventually the financial statement, I know is that somewhere we should mention there that we did do public consultation. Just to
Thank you, Donna. Moving on to Trustee Barrett.
Yeah, and I recognize, thank you, Madam Chair, and I recognize that there is a further audit committee report that's coming forward, but it's kind of the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart, in the sense that the audit committee, you know, consisting of both external, internal, and 3 trustees sitting on the audit committee, certainly fully endorse the recommendation to the board tonight with regards to the audit statements that are the financial report for 2020-21 coming forward. Having reviewed the statements in conjunction with staff, so certainly have examined the oversight responsibilities in the auditor's report in being able to, you know, bring this forward tonight. I think that there are a couple of things that as a board, we should actually be, I think, pleased with is the continued financial health of this organization. I know we had heard it earlier that education is a nonprofit that can be utilized. However, there is a spectrum of being able to ensure that there is financial prudence and fulfillment of fiduciary responsibilities, which I think has certainly occurred. Trustee Barnes sat on the audit committee for part of this year as well, and I joined after Trustee Barnes. But I would say that certainly the trustees that sit on the board fully endorse the bringing forward of this report. So,
thank you. Further comments or questions? We have a motion in front of us. I will reread the motion. It is recommended that the 2020-2021 financial report of Durham District School Board, including transfers to and from internally restricted funds, be approved as presented. I ask that you vote using the reactions. A green check mark means that you are supporting the motion, A red X would mean that you are not supporting the motion. If you could do that now. Motion has passed. Thank you. Now we will go to Trustee Edwards, and I think she's bringing forth perhaps 3 motions for SEAC. Trustee Edwards.
Thank you, Chair Morton. There are, as usual, SEAC reviews its membership as openings come up and review them to ensure that we have a diverse voice that represents all disabilities in the board. And so we had one member at large, person who also resigned. So we had a member at large position to fill. So we have 3 separate motions that has come from SEAC as far as recommendations for membership to the board that the board must should or should not approve. But this is a recommendation from SEAC that these memberships be approved. The first one is that a membership for the Black Parent Support Group, that Jenny McLaughlin be the SEAC representative and Carissa Foston Lewis be the alternate representative for the Black Parent Support Group.
Thank you, Donna. Do you want to handle these as 3 separate motions, or do you just
yes, because I'd like to. There are actually 3 different processes, if you wish, or categories of membership.
Okay, so 3 different motions. Each one would require a seconder, and we would vote on each one.
I would second Trustee Edwards' motion.
So Trustee Edwards has put forward the motion. Trustee Forbes has seconded it. Any questions, comments? Those in favor, please indicate with a green check mark. Those who are opposed, a red X. Thank you. Motion has passed. I'll go back to you, Donna, for your second motion.
The second one is for the position of member at large. The process of filling that is that there is a call for to the public to fill that position, and they should not represent any of the other, be a representative of any of the other organizations that already sit on SEAC, but basically to give a different point of view. And so a subcommittee was formed, and the subcommittee reviewed the applications. We actually had, I think it was 8 applications, which is quite a lot for a membership at large. And based on the subcommittee's review of applications, the SEAC approved the recommendation that Donna Edgebean represents the position of SEAC member at large. And that's the motion.
And that is your motion. Could I have somebody second that motion? Trustee Thatcher. Thank you. Questions, comments? Trustee Thatcher, do you have a question?
I do, thank you, and through you, Chair Morton. I just wondered if Trustee Edwards could, I'm just wondering if in this member at large position there is an alternative.
No, for member at large, there's no alternate.
Thank you.
It's the individual. They're not representing an association.
Okay, thank you.
Or a group of people.
Thank you. We have a motion regarding the member at large. It has been seconded. I ask you now to vote the green check mark or the red X. Motion has passed. Thank you. Moving back to Donna for non-voting membership.
And when we were going through actually some of the applications, we had several people of interest that sat and represented from our early years. And one of the part of the regulation is that you can't be part of one of the other committees within the board. However, we see, as we noted previously, when it comes to areas of concern around incidents and so forth, it really is focused on the early years, as well as some of the issues and supports that we need to put in places around the early years. So we recognized from SEAC's point of view that we should really have a representative from the early years consortium on SEAC, and it couldn't be a non-voting member, but we would really like their opinion and their viewpoints brought to SEAC. So we're recommending that a non-voting SEAC membership seat be established for the early years consortium representative.
And that is your motion, as seconded by Trustee Templeton. Questions or comments? Trustee Thatcher?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there could be some clarification around the rationale for voting and non-voting membership.
Because we have early years consortium is a committee we have over the board, and they cannot be a representative of either committees, as well as you. So we decided we still want their viewpoint there, and so we recognize that they would have valuable input coming towards to the board. And for SEAC, because the regulation for SEAC is quite clear, where the organizations that sit around the SEAC table or membership must be provincial associations represented locally, and so it's quite clear in the regulation, whereas this group would not fit under the regulation.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion in front of us. It has been seconded. If you support that motion, the green check mark. If you do not support it, the red X. This motion has also passed. Thank you, Donna, for bringing this forward. Moving on, we're going to look at recommended action D, and that is, we're going to go to Trustee Thatcher, and we're going to talk about Durham Region Transit.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Morton. I have a little preamble, and then I'd like to put forward a motion. With the province-wide shortage of school bus drivers and the ongoing impact it has on student transportation, it is important that we look at additional ways to support students getting to school with innovative solutions that support the use of public transit, especially when some students are typically eligible for student transportation on school buses. Some other regions are working collaboratively with school boards as public transit agencies recognize that the earlier people or students use public transit, the more likely they are to become long-term users of it. We also know that there are environmental benefits to public transit as a greener option than driving to school and contributing to more traffic. This proposal would help support student independence as they could use the bus pass for other purposes outside of school hours and help increase equity of access for those who may have financial limitations to getting around. Given that the board has limited access to funding for student transportation, the request should include consideration for a discounted student rate that is the same as for college and university students. Looking at ways to increase student ridership on Durham Region Transit has the potential to help raise additional revenue to support Durham Regional Transit infrastructure, develop a stronger collaboration between the board and the region, improve public transit routes and service for everyone across Durham Region. So therefore, I would like to put forward the motion that I move that the Durham District School Board send a delegation consisting of the chair and vice chair and a staff representative to the December 8th, 2021 meeting of the Durham Region Transit Executive Committee to request that DRT consider a pilot program that supports secondary student transportation at the discounted rate that is provided to students within the region.
Thank you for that motion, Trustee Thatcher. We would need a seconder. Could somebody second that motion, please? Just wave at me would be fine.
Hey, Trustee Lundquist had her hand raised, and I think Trustee Crawford did as well.
But I want to know if they are asking a question or seconding the motion. Trustee Lundquist, are you seconding the motion?
I am most definitely not doing that. I'm just reiterating that I have a potential
That's
conflict
right.
Here.
That's correct.
And
Thank
I
you.
would like the record to show that I've declared that, please.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. Trustee Crawford, your hand is up. Are you seconding the motion?
I'm seconding it.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, it's to get it out in front of us, yes.
Yes, then we have a motion on the table. It has been seconded. Questions and comments? Trustee Barrett.
I fully support this initiative. It's not the first time that we've done this or those people have been here. I don't understand why the Durham Regional Transportation has been so adverse to being able to work in a partnership. These are the comments I made about the Ottawa Carleton board, that they have a partnership. And I got beat up over that later on for talking eloquently about it at one of the meetings. But this is actually the thing that I'm talking about. The only thing is I would like to make an amendment to the motion that by inserting in the motion that the committee consists of the chair and the vice chair, I believe is what you said, Trustee Thatcher. I would suggest the chair, the vice chair, and student trustees if available, because I think the last time we went, we had significant uptake when students were able to talk from a student perspective on the need for and the rationale for support. So I'd like to make that amendment if I could.
So the amendment is to include student trustees on that delegation.
If available, because I don't want it to be not to go forward if student trustees are not available, but that's why I said, and student trustees if available.
Okay. Yep. Then do we need to have a vote on the amendment before moving forward?
You need a, I moved it, you need a seconder and then the vote on.
Okay, seconded by Trustee.
Paul.
Well,
I'm sorry, and if somebody else wants it.
Trustee Templeton. Questions regarding that amendment? Then we will have a vote on the amendment regarding including trustees that are students if they are available. Please indicate a green check mark or a red X. The amendment has passed. Thank you. Back to the original motion put forward by Trustee Thatcher.
Well, back to the amended motion.
That's right, the amended motion, correct. Trustee Edwards.
I do agree with this in principle, and I actually sat around the table with the student trustees at the last meeting we had with the regional chair at the time and the CEO of Durham Region Transit, and it was very much true that the student trustees had more pull than we did as trustees, as far as I could see at the end of that meeting. However, I'm a little concerned about that Durham Region Transit did just reduce for this year the fee by $20. So I think that before we actually look at a reduced rate, I'm just a little concerned that the focus is going to be on the reduced rate and not looking at basically an affordable and reliable service. So I'm a little concerned about that, because a lot of the issues too are around reliable service and having input when it comes to specific input when it comes to reducing and limiting routes. Because Ajax, I can honestly tell you, they eliminated a lot of routes, and I'm pretty sure on some of the others, and basically wiped out all transportation for our student trustees. So I'm a little concerned about the focus of the motion on just reduced, because they'll tell you that they just reduced it by $20 for this year. So I'm not sure that's exactly going to meet our needs.
Thank you, Trustee
Chair
Edwards.
Martin, could I suggest that we go to Associate Director Wright for information around the financial side of it?
I think
Director Marsh has her hand up.
Right, Director Marsh has her hand up. We will go to her first.
Thank you. Trustee Edwards, I think you raise a really interesting point. I think in the work that we had done previously as staff when we were looking into feasibility, it wasn't that we were looking for the reduced rate ongoing. It was to be treated on par with other students within the region. So for example, to offer university and college students one rate and charge students within our district a more expensive rate didn't seem equitable, nor did it seem equitable the proposal that previously that was made. I understand that if students went in person and bought a bus pass, they would pay one rate, but boards would pay a different rate and a more expensive rate. So I think that is part of the background to what we're asking. It's not that we're asking for a further reduction. We're asking that our students be treated on par with other students within the region, if that makes sense.
And that does make sense. So I'm just wondering if that's what the motion really, because it does talk about a reduced rate, I'm pretty sure. And so could you read the motion again, Trustee Thatcher, as amended?
I move that the Durham District School Board send a delegation consisting of the chair, vice chair, and student trustees, if available, and a staff representative to the December 8th, 2021 meeting of the Durham Region Transit Executive Committee to request that DRT consider a pilot program that supports secondary student transportation at the discounted rate that is provided to students within the region.
Donna?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just, okay. At the discounted rate of, that is
other students, yeah. Donna, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I actually misread that. It says it should read to other students within the region.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm wondering if Associate Director Wright would like to weigh in on that.
Thank you very much, Chair Morton. I believe Director Marsh answered the question fully. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Trustee Crawford has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's a good idea to approach them. We have to keep in mind that it's probably a matter of they just don't have the equipment. Trustee Barrett mentioned Ottawa. Well, Ottawa might be the capital of the world, and this region doesn't have the equipment. It could be that they could come back to us and say, fine, how about you, the Durham School Board, putting some money in to supplement it. So I don't know whether that should be part of the motion we should think about, and maybe I'll ask the director or Superintendent Wright, Associate Director Wright, are we willing to put some money into this?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Trustee Crawford, I think that there could be opportunities for external funding to support both the Durham District School Board's intentions of serving our students for the reasons that Trustee Thatcher indicated. There's an opportunity potentially, for example, to try to, when we think of the Ministry of Education in the province of Ontario and the incentives they're currently putting in to recruit school bus drivers and more yellow buses, there could be an opportunity for rerouting and having some funding going to public transit systems, which would be a win for the entire community of Durham and would support our students for the reasons that Trustee Thatcher is indicating. So I think there's an opportunity, if there's willingness, to seek other funding for the region, because this is a good practice. And I think it's one that the province might be interested in supporting. They're already funding the yellow buses, and they're already looking at further incentives, understanding that yellow bus drivers and yellow bus systems is very different than employment with the region, and that it might be more attractive to be employed through the region.
Thank you for that response.
I think that would be a good approach.
Moving to Trustee Templeton, you have a question.
Actually, it's more of a comment. As it stands right now, the Durham Region Transit is looking to increase their ridership, and this is an opportunity for them to help our students out in the long term. And I do agree with Nora's approach, or Director Norris's approach to the yellow busing and money redirecting and everything else. There is a big opportunity here if it's presented the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we need to understand that the Durham Catholic District School Board is also sending a delegation to have that conversation. We have a motion in front of us. It has been seconded. Trustee Barnes, last question.
Yeah, sorry, just quickly. So do we then need staff to support so that delegation? Because if we're going to talk about presenting solutions, not just asking a question, does staff need to be a part of that in the preparation to go? Or I don't know what that would look like if we're going to present and give solutions. I think there would need to be detailed information around that.
Yes, in the motion, it talked about the chair, the vice chair. The amended motion said students, whether student trustees, plus staff members. So yes, staff would definitely be providing input. Does that answer your question, Trustee Barnes? Okay, we have a motion in front of us. It is an amended motion. It has been seconded. We will now vote. The green check mark, the red X. This motion has passed. Thank you. Moving on to information items, and we do have a few. The first one will go to Trustee Barrett, and we'll ask him about the Audit Committee meeting summary of November.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, we've already had the financial statements as presented by Melissa Deward, so I won't waste any more valuable time. You've heard our support for the processes that have gone on. The one thing that I will mention specifically that is coming up next on the agenda is with regards to the Audit Committee external appointee. For the process, the term expires in February of 2022. But Madam Chair, that information is coming in the next report. So that's my report, and I'll pass it off to David for the details and being able to fill that vacancy.
Thank you. Associate Director.
Appreciate the lead-in, Trustee Barrett. So a little bit of a repeat here to the minutes, but wanted to bring all the detail to you this evening. Our audit committee operates within the parameters outlined in Ontario Regulation 36110, and within that regulation is included the member composition of our audit committee, as well as the terms of those terms of appointment of those audit committee members. So one of our external audit committee members, Carla Mansfield, first joined the DDSB audit committee in 2018, and last year by this group of trustees, Carla's term was extended by 1 year in order to create some overlap in between the external member terms. So that extension is due to expire in February 2022. And so we need to move forward with the process of posting and potentially replacing that position. So the timeline to fill the expiring audit committee position is included in the report, section 4.2. As you can see, we will be beginning the process in the very near future. And we do hope to bring a recommendation back to you for consideration in February. That is my report. Happy to take any questions through you, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Certainly. Questions? Trustee Crawford.
Just a quick question. People don't usually beat down the door to apply for this. What's the procedure if we do not get an application?
Through you, Madam Chair. So we do have a couple of options. I believe that our friend Carla has indicated her willingness to remain on the audit committee if that is if we are unable to find a suitable candidate. So certainly I would suggest we could go back and have a conversation with her. And if that wasn't an option that we could move forward with, we would repost and see if we could convince somebody to come out of the woodwork. I know that other school boards have struggled with finding suitable members of the audit committee because they do need to come with a certain level of financial expertise and background in order that they can participate fully on the audit committee. I know other boards have leveraged community contacts and other partners, external audit firms, etc., and have found folks looking for some volunteer experience. So that being said, we did the last time we posted just a year ago receive interest and were able to recruit a very capable candidate. And so I'm optimistic that our posting will generate some interest. Thanks.
Do we have questions for either Associate Director Wright or Trustee Barrett regarding the audit committee? No? Thank you very much. Moving on. Durham Student Transportation Services. And I would bet that we have Kelly Michulin with us.
Hi.
Hello, Kelly.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. So through you, Madam Chair, the DSTS annual report for school year 2021.
We have a problem with your auditory, Kelly. Does anyone have advice for Kelly?
Madam Chair, I'm going to send Kelly a note right now and just ask if she can rejoin.
Thank you.
Associate Director Wright, I'm wondering if she's having trouble with tonight in terms of technology, whether or not we can put her on speakerphone through you. We won't have a visual necessarily, but at least the verbal content would carry forward if the second attempt isn't successful.
Thank you, John.
Hi, sorry, I'm back again.
Kelly.
I apologize for that. So let me start over again. So through you, Madam Chair, the DSTS annual report for school year 2021 can be found starting on page 100 of your agenda. The report's being presented as information, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Everyone has the report in front of them. If you have a question for Kelly, now is the time. Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you. So I'm puzzling over the decrease in the number of bused high school students, secondary students. So if you look from 2016 to 2020, there's a pretty significant decrease in the numbers. Is that just related to a change in boundary? Like the distance? Sorry, my phones keep going off. My apologies.
Which page are you looking at? Is that page 11?
Sorry, I'm gonna have to pull it back up, Kelly. I just made a note about it. I didn't.
I think it's because it was COVID and we had a lot of virtual students, so they were outside of being bused because they were virtual.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes more sense because it was just a very large number and I couldn't quite wrap my head around why there would be such a huge decrease.
Yes, this report that for the 2021 year is quite exceptional with the year that we had with COVID, virtual schooling, and then 2 closures, one of them quite extended. But you know, we publish a report every year since 2014 and we list them all on our website. So we did it for last year as well.
Okay, so that is what I'm talking about. It's page 112 when you look at the chart and the number breakdown underneath. But if that's the explanation, then I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Barrett, you have a question.
Yeah, and thank you for the report. I'm just wondering, and I quite understand and appreciate that at the beginning of each year, as you continuously make adjustments in ridership, etc. Like I understand that, been around long enough that I understand the first few weeks are chaos as you balance out from what's planning to what's actual. I'm just wondering on a CS, on a customer service side, if we take any stats on the number of calls that are the number of calls that are dropped, calls that, you know, the length of time to be able to call people back. Because if I hear concerns raised, it's typically around, I haven't heard back, I haven't heard back. They may not like the answer that they get, but there's just not necessarily, you know, that element. I'm just wondering in your phone system or what technology you utilize, if there's a way for us to appreciate the number of calls and what customer service might look like to a parent who's seeking answers. Do you do any of those type of measurements?
Our current system does not have those capabilities. It would need a significant upgrade to a more call center system, but it's certainly something we can look into. There are expectations on all staff to return calls within a 24 to 48 hour period. And then staff usually work 7 days a week to try to clear those logs of calls and emails. The other thing that we did proactively this year is we did on our voicemail say the best way to contact us is via email, so that we could also limit the duplications of calls. And then we bring additional staff in to also support all of the route coordinators throughout the area. But it is certainly something we can look into.
Yeah, and thanks for that. It might be something that the board of DSTS consider, because I think that, like I said, nobody really likes the answer sometimes, Kelly, you provide, so I understand that. And I don't mean that as a negative. I mean, there are some realities to busing. But certainly, you know, the CS side to this is an important element because you really are a service, not only to the Durham board and our sister board, but also to those parents that are calling. So it may be something that the chair or our staff representative might consider on a go forward basis, because these measurements are good, but it's the parents that say, I can't get a return call or I can't get information, which is critical too. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And yes, customer service is very important. And Kelly knows that. We all know that because we've had many calls. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Kelly? Seeing none, Kelly, thank you for joining us. And we apologize for keeping you here for a fair amount of time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Moving on, physical education and athletic extracurricular protocols. We will go to Superintendent Nevels.
Good evening again. The report can be found on page 118 of your package. Within the background section of the report, you will find information on the chronology of the guidelines that supported our late summer decision-making and communication related to local protocols in alignment with the Ministry of Education and Durham Region Health Department. At this time, I would like to thank the leadership and executive of both the Durham Elementary Athletic Association and the Lake Ontario Secondary School Athletics organizations for volunteering their time to develop plans for the safe return of sports, as well as the volunteer coaches and conveners who have put their names forward to organize events and coach the students this school year. We understand that with everything associated with COVID, their commitment this year, even more than ever, is greatly valued and appreciated. As identified in the analysis section of the report, we continue to maintain social distancing, indoor masking, and hand and equipment sanitization wherever it is recommended. Examples of activities engaged in during physical education classes, as well as secondary and elementary extracurriculars and intramurals, are also shared within the report. We've had a successful return to sport in the fall season and continue to engage with Durham Region Health Department as we plan for the upcoming winter season. At this time, we are returning with plans for the majority of secondary winter sports and have recently begun elementary inter-school sport competitions as well. Not included in this report is information we just received last Thursday from Durham Public Health to allow us to proceed with planning for higher cardio sports like basketball to return unmasked, although we will continue to require masks for all other indoor activities. We know the impact of physical fitness on mental health, well-being, and overall student success, and we continue to work within all guidelines as we ensure that as many students as possible are able to safely participate in school sports. The report is brought to the Board of Trustees this evening for information, and we are available to clarify any sport-related or other questions at this time.
Thank you, Superintendent Nevels. Trustee Barrett, you have a comment.
Comment and maybe a question, I guess, really, Superintendent Nevels. I know that you and I communicated back and forth with regards to basketball. So I know you stated that we are considering or looking at potentially higher cardio exercises. Can you be a little more definitive on that in the sense of when are you considering, so that I can answer constituents with regards to that potential? So
most definitely. So our LASA organization is meeting this Wednesday And we should have something definite following their meeting on Wednesday. It's looking very promising for us in terms of basketball, given this recent exemption by public health for us to proceed.
Okay, thank you. That's excellent. I can communicate that. I do find it very interesting that if you make $2 million and bounce a piece of rubber up and down, you can run up and down a basketball court without a mask, without being restricted. But if you're a kid who's looking for some balancing in mental health, on being able to potentially use it as a college sport, we have to restrict them. And I would say that there's a significant, and I'm not saying you, Stephen, or anybody at the board, but I'm going to say that there's definitely a definitive difference in the way that certain sports are treated, and depending upon your economic, socioeconomic background. It's much more important for our kids to play sports than it is for an athlete who's, and I don't want to diminish anybody who's a significant athlete, but I am absolutely glad that we're considering this. This is a very important piece. And so I look forward to Thursday to see what the outcome is. So thank you very much.
Great point, Trustee Barrett. Moving to Trustee Thatcher.
Well, thank you. And through you, Chair Morton, I'm not sure if Trustee Lundquist was ahead of me or not. But anyway, I have just maybe a comment and a very brief question. Superintendent Nevels, I am so totally on board with you as far as physical activity is concerned. I'm a major proponent for physical activity for our kids. I think that we have to be in touch with our audience and make sure that we don't have unreasonable expectations of our kids sitting in their seats for 2.5 hours. And the reason that I sound so passionate about this is that I had a call from a parent earlier today, and I realized I do know the procedure, and I definitely will pass that along in the appropriate way. But the school apparently has reduced time outside. So some kids are sitting in their seat and not allowed to get out of their seat during a recess that is indoors. And so one recess indoors, one recess outdoors. It surprised me only because of, our Durham, the recommendations we have from the Durham Region Health Department, and anybody that you listen to talking about how things are much better outside than the air we're breathing inside. So I guess the question is, I don't remember hearing about reducing recesses in any of our discussions with protocols. And Stephen, I don't mean to put you on the spot here or anything, but I guess I am. So is this just maybe a one-off situation, do you think?
So I would assume potentially that this is really a question that would be best suited for that school and that school administrator to find out the decisions that they had made. In terms of the sport report that we brought forward tonight, we are definitely wanting students to engage in intramurals and to engage outside on the yard with their peers as much as possible within the given guidelines that we have.
And this, in terms of extracurricular, we have many schools that have extracurricular activities.
Correct, both inside masked and outside without masks, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Lundquist?
I'm very aware of how late it's getting, so I'm going to be brief, but one of the things that Michael spoke about actually is important when we're talking about equitable access to physical spaces and opportunities to participate in activities that have a salutary effect on people's mental health, particularly children's mental health. So in recent days, I've had a number of inquiries again about the use of school gyms for clubs who don't have space outside or can't afford to get space outside because of the size of the program and whatnot. So we have kids who play hockey, which is, we know is an expensive sport, and they're able to play and they can participate and do the things that are good for their mental health. But we have a bunch of kids in other programming that don't have that same kind of access to facilities. And I'm wondering if we have any idea of when we might be able to open up our gym spaces to provide some opportunity for those kids in other programs.
Through you, Chair Morton, I think I'll take that one because it's not directly related to your report, Superintendent Nevels, if you're okay with that. So
I'm sorry, I slipped it in just because it's relevant to the conversation, I think.
For sure. And, you know, we understand the shared space and how we're part of the community and how important our space is. But our first priority from the very beginning has said we need to support the functioning of schools and the education of students. We have a significant labor shortage that we are trying to work our way through at a time when we have increased COVID management, which has huge implications on custodial staff. So at this time, we're still not able to open up to any evening use because we do not have the capacity as a district to do that and maintain a safe and clean environment during the day. As we continue to hire, we continue to review and examine. Our commitment is, of course, to youth organizations first within the community and then expanding out as we can, but it still isn't feasible for us. And Associate Director Wright, I don't know if you have any update on that one, but right now we're even changing the way we staff, Trustee Lundquist, from historical practices to provide more support to the custodial sector during the day. So I don't think we're close yet, but we are working on it. And Associate Director Wright may have more detail.
Associate Director Wright?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. Thank you. I only have one comment, and I'm looking at the evidence of impact at the end of your report, and it says the Ministry of Education has identified that being active has a positive impact on physical fitness and is an important element of achievement, mental health, well-being, and overall student success. I think that statement says it all. Thank you. Moving on, Parent Involvement Committee, and we will turn to Trustee Scott Templeton and Superintendent Lazarus.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Morton. This report can be found on page 125, 127 of the agenda package and is provided to share the 2021-2022 membership of the Parent Involvement Committee. The purpose of the committee is to support and encourage and enhance parent engagement at the board level and at the student level, at the local level as well, to improve student achievement and well-being. We have filled all vacancies except for our 2 northern positions. We will continue to seek participation from our northern communities. And thank you for listening. This is the report for your information.
Thank you. Trustee Templeton, did you want to comment?
No, I just know that there's some people that were on the committee from last year were still inquiring about a 2-year term because a lot of them were interested in a 3, like a couple were interested in coming back. I think we could probably reach out to them a little bit later if we don't fill those positions and possibly look at making an amendment somewhere along the lines of the policy.
Just to add on to that, I think part of the what we are going to do as a committee is to certainly look at the bylaws again and to see if there are any changes that we might want to make for this year.
Comments or questions regarding the PIC? I have a question, and I'm looking at the north, both elementary and secondary, and seeing that we have no parents. What can we do to encourage that kind of engagement? We need to have those parents from the north. How can we do that?
Absolutely, Trustee Morton. So I've already connected with the SECs in each of the northern regions, northern cities, sorry. And so myself and possibly another member of the committee a parent will attend the SEC meetings at all the schools in the north to encourage them to participate and to tell them the importance of their voice, because we do know that they have unique issues in the north that we need to address as as a board. And so we will be attending every SEC meeting within the next couple of months to encourage them to participate in this committee.
Thank you very much. Moving on. SEAC committee. So we'll go to Trustee Edwards.
Very short and sweet. The report from the meeting from September 16th, 2021 can be found on pages 128 to 137, and that's my report. Thank you.
Comments or questions for Donna regarding SEAC? Seeing none, we will go to Trustee Barnes and we'll talk about an OPSPA report.
Thank you. I'll also be brief. Just a thank you to trustees for their input around the Project Compass that's going on at OPSPA, as well as we met. Original meeting was November 6th. We discussed and gave feedback on the draft development for Project Compass, as well as we talked about the annual GSN submissions to the ministry and outlined concerns from all the different boards about issues concerning them that would like to be addressed in the GSN. Some of the concerns were to replenish the reserve funds, to close some of the gap funding around COVID, additional funding looking at special education and mental health support for students, and a few other items. So this is my report.
Thank you, Trustee Barnes. Comments or further questions about OPSPA? I see none. I draw your attention. We do have some correspondence there. I also draw your attention to the time. We are just at the border. It says 9:55, so we had 5 more minutes, and I was going to have to ask for a motion to go beyond 10. So I think we've made it. Anything that we've missed this evening? Then consider this meeting to be adjourned, and good night, everybody.